Some cases fade quietly into the background. Summer Wells' case never did. From the moment she vanished on a warm June evening in 2021, the story gripped the nation. Every detail was dissected, every interview replayed, every rumor passed along until the truth was almost impossible to separate from the noise. But the truth never stopped existing. It's always been there, hidden somewhere between the ridges of Hawkins County and the fractured words of those who claim to know nothing. And now, something has shifted. This week, Dawn Wells made a statement unlike anything we've heard before. Not just another plea for answers, not another defensive remark, but something more, something that stops you cold when you hear it. It's a choice of words that doesn't just answer a question, it creates new ones. Words that pull you back to the beginning of this case, to that day in June, and force you to ask, what have we missed? And just as the public was trying to unpack what it all meant, law enforcement made their own move. In a rare public assurance, security forces told the world, we are getting closer to the end. Closer to the end of what? The investigation? The speculation? Or are they hinting at the one ending everyone has been waiting for, the truth? Because if Dawn's statement is what it appears to be, it's not just another soundbite. It might be the thread that unravels 3 years of mystery, suspicion, and silence. And when a thread like that starts to pull, it doesn't just bring answers, it brings everything and everyone into the light. Tonight, we're going to break down exactly what was said, why it matters, and how it could change the course of this case forever. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 3,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 4,000, then 5,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button and where you're watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. It's been over 3 years since 5-year-old Summer Wells disappeared from her family's home in the hills of Hawkins County. 3 years of searches that led to nowhere. 3 years of interviews, accusations, and the kind of silence that can crush a community. And now, Dawn Wells has spoken again. But this wasn't just another interview or another plea to the public. This was different. There's something in the way he said it, in the exact words he chose, that doesn't sit right. At first you might miss it. Most people would. But if you've been watching this case closely, if you've been following every shift and shadow, you'll feel it. It's the kind of statement that doesn't just make you think, it makes you rewind, listen again, and ask yourself, why would he say that? Because in the world of unsolved cases, the smallest crack can bring down the largest wall. And just as this ripple began spreading through the true crime community, law enforcement, usually silent, careful, and vague, gave us something rare, a note of confidence, a quiet, deliberate message that they are closer to the end. Closer to the end of what? The search, the speculation, or the waiting? Tonight we pull this moment apart, word by word, frame by frame, to find out whether this is just another headline, or the beginning of the truth, finally breaking the surface. Asterisk to understand why Dawn Wells' recent words matter. We have to go back to the beginning, to a date burned into the memory of anyone who's followed this case. June 15, 2021. A warm summer afternoon in Rogersville, Tennessee, a rural stretch of Ben Hill Road, quiet, isolated, surrounded by dense woodland and winding gravel drives. Sometime between late afternoon and early evening, 5-year-old Summer Moon Utah Wells was reported missing. The last confirmed sightings placed her outside her home, barefoot, playing. According to her family, she had been helping plant flowers with her mother and grandmother. Minutes later, she was gone. That evening, the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call. The search began almost immediately, with local deputies, neighbors, and later, specialized teams combing the property and surrounding woods. Inside the Wells home that day, Candace Bly, Summer's mother, who would be the first to speak publicly about her daughter's disappearance. Dawn Wells, her father, who was reportedly at work until he received the call no parent wants to hear. And Grandma, Candace's mother, who played a role in those last shared moments before Summer vanished. The public was given a timeline, a simple, almost linear account of the afternoon. But in the years since, cracks have appeared in that story. Discrepancies in details, differences in tone, and the uncomfortable truth that no one outside law enforcement can say with certainty what happened in the crucial minutes before Summer was gone. And yet, here we are. Nearly 3 years later, the public is tired of rerun interviews, tired of theories that go nowhere, tired of the same unanswered questions circling back like vultures over the same barren ground. But fatigue doesn't mean the truth is gone. It just means it's harder to see, buried under layers of time, frustration, and noise. And when Don Wells chose his words this time, some of that noise fell silent, if only for a moment. Before we move forward, I need you to understand something. Every word you're about to hear, every pause, every shift in tone, carries meaning. In cases like this, nothing is ever truly accidental. And here on Detective Max, we're not just another voice recycling the same headlines. We dig, we dissect, we bring forward what others leave buried. Because justice doesn't happen in the dark. So keep watching, because what's coming next may change the way you see this case forever. For nearly 3 years, Don Wells has been no stranger to the spotlight. From the earliest days of Summer's disappearance, he spoke, often, and at length, in interviews that painted a consistent picture of his position. He insisted on his innocence. He pointed to shadowy outsiders, to unseen threats, to forces beyond the family's control. He criticized law enforcement for what he saw as missteps, and at times he pushed back hard against a public that questioned his every move. There were patterns in his words, familiar refrains, a tone that rarely wavered, until now. Because just days ago, that tone shifted. It was subtle, almost camouflaged in the flow of conversation. But when you line it up against everything he's ever said before, it stands out like a flashing light in a dark field. And for those who have studied this case, it may mark a turning point, one that can't be ignored. Asterisk, then came the statement. In a recent conversation, one that at first seemed like yet another familiar defense of his family, Don Wells slipped in a phrase that stopped some listeners cold. He said, quote, "Well, maybe I should have kept her closer that day." At face value, it might sound like an offhand regret, the kind of thing any parent might say after tragedy. But in the world of criminal investigation, words are never just words. The choice of should have kept her closer isn't casual. It's not the same as I wish she hadn't wandered off, or I wish I'd been there. It implies presence. It implies proximity. It paints an image, not of a child vanishing from an unseen distance, but of a moment when she was right there, and then wasn't. Now compare that to his earlier statements. Over and over, Don had stressed being away from the immediate scene, working, relying on others to watch her. There was always a distance in his narrative, a gap between himself and the final moments before Summer disappeared. But this new line closes that gap. And the question is, was it a slip of the tongue, or the first crack in a carefully maintained story? Why does this matter now? Because timing is everything. For months, even years, Don Wells' public statements have been consistent to the point of repetition. The same explanations, the same denials, the same frustrations toward law enforcement and the public. That kind of consistency, whether it's rehearsed or sincere, becomes part of the fabric of a cold case. It hardens. It doesn't change. But this is change. And change in a long frozen narrative can send ripples through an investigation. We know law enforcement doesn't move on emotion. They move on patterns, and on breaks in those patterns. A phrase like "I should have kept her closer," if it contradicts earlier accounts, could be seen as either the loosening of guarded language, or the result of private conversations finally surfacing in public. And here's the thing. Small shifts like this don't just catch the attention of internet sleuths. They can reignite public interest, reopen old leads, and put quiet pressure back on the people who may know more than they've been saying. To an investigator, it's not just what was said, it's when it was said, and why now. Then came a second shift, not from the family this time, but from law enforcement security. In a rare public comment, a security liaison attached to the case said just 6 words: "We're getting closer to the end." It's the kind of statement you almost never hear in a missing persons investigation, especially one this old. Because the truth is, most of these cases don't get to the end. They fade, they stall, they gather dust in filing cabinets and hard drives. So when someone tied to the security side of this investigation makes a statement like that, it lands heavy. It raises questions. Is this confidence grounded in something new? A piece of evidence the public hasn't heard about? A witness finally ready to talk? A piece of forensic work quietly wrapping up behind the scenes? Or is it something else entirely? A calculated psychological tactic meant to stir movement, unsettle certain people, or push an uncooperative witness into making a mistake? Because in cases like this, words can work like pressure. And when you apply the right amount, in the right place, something is bound to give. Asterisk with Dawn's new statement now in play. The hours of June 15, 2021, take on a different shape. That day, the day Summer Wells vanished, has been dissected countless times. But when you re-examine it through the lens of fresh words, new cracks sometimes appear. According to the family's original account, Summer was last seen sometime in the late afternoon, after returning home from a short outing. By early evening, the first 911 call had been placed. In Dawn's earlier statements, those hours were painted as a blur, ordinary, until they weren't. But his recent phrasing, subtle as it is, seems to open small gaps. Moments where his description of the timeline doesn't fully align with what neighbors remember, or with what was confirmed through search records. For example, one neighbor recalls seeing activity near the property earlier than publicly stated. Law enforcement search logs, meanwhile, indicate priority sweeps were conducted in very specific zones that day. Zones chosen for reasons they've never explained in detail. Does Dawn's new comment reinforce the idea that those areas mattered more than we knew? Or does it hint at movement somewhere else entirely? And if you map those search points against witness accounts, the exact times, the weather, the positions of search teams, you start to see patterns. Some fit the official timeline, others don't, which raises the question, if even the smallest detail in those critical hours shifts, does the entire day have to be redrawn? With the timeline under fresh scrutiny, the theories that have been circulating since day one take on new weight. The first, abduction. For many, this has always been the cleanest explanation. A stranger or opportunistic predator passing through, seizing a fleeting moment. It fits the speed with which Summer seemed to vanish, but it also hinges on the idea of chance. Rare, but not impossible. Yet Dawn's new comments, combined with the security team's unusual confidence, suggest knowledge of something specific, not the randomness of a ghost suspect. The second, an accident, covered up. It's a theory whispered in forums and private conversations, that something happened close to home, perhaps in panic or fear, and the truth was buried. This idea has always had holes, but it also explains why every inch of surrounding wilderness was scoured with no trace found. Still, if this were the case, what would give security the certainty to say, "We're getting closer to the end"? That's either misplaced bravado, or the result of evidence they haven't shared. And the third, foul play from someone close. It's the theory no one wants to face, but one investigators can't ignore. People close to a victim often come under the most scrutiny, and sometimes their own words create that focus. In this case, Dawn's shifting statements, the timing of events, and lingering inconsistencies keep this possibility alive. Yet, if law enforcement already suspected someone in the inner circle, wouldn't an arrest have been made by now? Each theory has its gaps. Each one could fit, or crumble, depending on a single undisclosed fact. And that's the heart of this moment. If the security's confidence is genuine, and Dawn's words truly matter, one of these theories may be closer to the truth than we think. And so, we wait. Authorities say little. The security team offers hints, but no proof. Dawn speaks, and his words ripple through the case like stones in still water. But for the public, for those who have followed every lead, watched every interview, and clung to every shred of hope, The silence is its own kind of torture. It's the space between updates that breeds the most speculation. Theories morph into rumors. Facts get tangled with feelings. And each passing day without answers feels like a quiet admission that either the truth is more complicated than we've been told, or more damning than we can imagine. In these moments, the case becomes more than an investigation. It becomes a test of patience, of faith, of whether the pursuit of justice can outlast the weight of time itself. Because the truth, whatever it is not going to arrive wrapped in comfort. It's going to come suddenly, and it's going to change everything. Behind the headlines, behind the theories and the timelines, there's a family. For the Wells family, every day since June 15, 2021, has been lived under a microscope. Grief, raw, jagged, unpredictable, is not a neat thing. It can look defensive. It can sound sharp. It can make people seem closed off when in truth, they're just trying to breathe without breaking. But in the court of public opinion, those moments become evidence. A clipped answer, a lack of visible tears, a nervous laugh. To strangers, these are red flags. To those inside that home, they might just be the only way to survive the next hour without collapsing. Suspicion is a heavy shadow. It isolates. It makes allies disappear, and turns neighbors into silent observers. And while the world debates their innocence or guilt, the family still wakes up every morning to the same unchanging fact. Summer is not there. What's seen in public is rarely the whole truth. What's happening privately may be something no one outside that house could ever fully understand. This case is not fading away. We are not letting it. Every contradiction, every unexplored lead, every piece of testimony that doesn't sit right, we are going to pull it apart until we understand it. Because Summer Wells is not just a name in a headline. She is a child whose life was stolen from her family, from her community, and from the future she deserved. We owe her more than speculation. We owe her the truth. And we are going to get to the root of this, no matter how many layers have to be stripped back. Summer Wells deserves justice. And until the day that justice is served, this story will not rest. Somewhere out there, someone knows something. Maybe it's a memory you've pushed away, a conversation you overheard, a detail you dismissed because it felt too small. But in cases like this, the smallest details can break open the silence. If you were in or around Hawkins County, Tennessee, on June 15, 2021, even if you think what you saw or heard doesn't matter, think again. We challenge you. If you know something, speak. Not tomorrow. Not when the time feels right. Speak now, because the clock is still ticking, and justice for Summer can't wait. Ben Hill Road at dusk, the air still, the trees holding on to secrets they've carried for far too long. Somewhere in that silence, the echoes of a little girl's laughter, replaced now by questions that refuse to fade. If Dawn Wells' words were a mistake, time will prove them harmless. But if they were something more, then perhaps the truth has been in plain sight all along. And if the security's confidence is justified, the end is coming. The question is, whose end will it be? If you know anything about the disappearance of Summer Wells, contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at 1-800-TBI-FIND. One call could be the difference between a cold trail and justice. You might be wondering, why is Detective Max back on Ben Hill Road? The answer is simple and troubling. The recent words from Dawn Wells have shifted the ground beneath this investigation. They've raised new questions, and according to security sources, they may have brought us closer to the breaking point than ever before. Detective Max isn't here to repeat old steps. He's here because something about Dawn's statement, combined with evidence and witness accounts, has reignited leads that were thought to be cold. And if these leads connect, they could point to the truth about what really happened to Summer Wells. Asterisk. Thank you for watching, for staying engaged, and for refusing to let Summer Wells' name fade away. Your eyes, your voice, and your vigilance matter. I'll see you next time, as we keep pushing toward the truth, together.